Здравствуйте.
Hello. Let's give a round of applause. Nina Belyavskaya is going to tell us about why do we have such horrible traffic jams in Moscow. Aw, you're optimistic, aren't you? Nina Belyavskaya is going to tell you how we are finding out why we have such horrible traffic jams in Moscow. Thank you very much to the organizers of the conference for the opportunity to speak, and thank you, of course, to the authors of the MobilityDB. Thank you to the MobilityDB team.
Волк.
And I work in the service of Movement of Moscow Trans, which is the main transport authority of public transport in Moscow, and it is our task to make transportation better. Because Moscow is a large and modern megapolis, we need transport which suits it. We need more than just electric trains, subways, and other trains, but we need buses, trams, even electrobuses. All of this needs to be improved, and in order to optimize, we need to know where our problems lie. And in order to find the problems, we need analytics. And I'm going to share a bit about how we do this. Now, all the machines, all the vehicles of the Moscow transport system have GLONASS equipment equipped on them. Every 30 seconds they get the coordinates, and these coordinates are then passed on into the unified database, out of which they are then sent to the various dispatchers, to Yandex Transport. For example, they use this data to predict, but we collect this data and we collect them for further analysis. During a day, we collect approximately half a gigabyte of data, which doesn't seem a lot for many commercial enterprises, but for Moscow Trans as a state authority, where we have 1.5 terabyte or maybe 2 terabyte space a year, this amount of data presents a problem. Now, about how do we work with this data? The data analysis, one of the examples of such an analysis is how long does it take to get from point A to point B. Now here we see an almost ideal situation where the graph during the day stays the same. We have a very low deviation apart from certain points over here, which are like accidents. So this is a tram which is going on a select route, and when it does not have any interferences, everything is usually very ideal. With the trolley bus, everything is somewhat more difficult. Here you can see the rush hours. The deviation is significant, and for a comparison, we see the movement of the trolley bus before and after. We had a select lane selected for it on the Himosky highway, and it does help, but we see that it's still not ideal. Now, one more tool are heat maps, which allow us to quickly understand where and during which time of day we encounter problematic areas. Where do we need to, first of all, make the traffic lights work differently, or to get additional lanes, or to change the way that the select lanes are built in case they, for some reason, are not working? Last year, during the conference, I've heard the presentation of Esteban Azemini, who was talking about MobilityDB. And I became interested. I wanted to try and apply this library to our tasks. If before we used PostGIS, and we continue to use PostGIS, every record is a point and time. The point and time are different columns. Each separate time is a separate entry. When we are turning this into MobilityDB, first of all, we are uniting the coordinates and the time into a single field. And then we can only keep not only just a single point in an entry, but we can keep an entire track of cars there. This is how we're able to have 10 million entries per day go down to 15,000 entries a day. And so the overall size of the table was able to be brought down to 5 megabytes a day, which gives us 100 times fold of an advantage. And right now we want to test. We want to check how well will our calculations work out with the new system. Now, when we're using just PostGIS, when we're calculating the distance traveled, we usually find a space or the place where our car has moved from the starting line to the finish line. We're using the function in order to unite the points into segments with accordance to the car identifier. And as a result, we get 2 points. And the exact time when this segment was passed, we still have to approximate it. This is what used to be the case. Now, when we are using MobilityDB, even though the query becomes somewhat more complex, because from the beginning I found the points of intersection, and then I'm trying to find if we're moving in the right direction, if the track is moving the right way. But as a result, we straight away get a very precise time. The library does all the approximating. And I have compared the speed of calculation in various segments and various areas, and it is clear that MobilityDB gives a stable and more quick result. And when we're applying this to the larger tables with the cars, the win is more noticeable. The speed map. Here, the task is solved by searching for the segments of the trajectory that are going along the given segment. Now, when we're using just PostGIS, we're just choosing a number of points that are highlighted on this segment of the street, and out of them, later, outside the query, we are combining a trajectory, we're calculating its length and the time period that it took to cover it. In MobilityDB allows us in a single query to select the required segments of the trajectory with accordance to these points with the azimuth function to understand which ones are going in the correct direction, and straight away to figure out the speed for each one of the segments. And once again, I have just launched with various settings and various parameters for different time periods the calculations of such a map, and MobilityDB does better. One more task which I would like to talk about, to which I do not yet have a prepared solution for, is that we can have situations where, because of some errors in navigation throughout a certain period of time, maybe a couple of minutes, the data does not come in. And a simple approximation, a simple connection of the segment will no longer give us the correct result. So we require to recover the trajectory on the unknown transport route. And this is not going to be useful for calculating the speed because during, for example, 10 minutes, a bus can travel fairly far, and it will be traveling with different speeds on different segments of the road, and it is going to ruin the image if we try to do so. But it is useful for completing the task of understanding the regularity of the route. So, for example, there is a difference. Did you need to wait 10 minutes or 20 minutes for your bus? So, for solving this task, lost tracks are useful if we know how to recover them. Now, the conclusion of the work that I've conducted is that MobilityDB is a very comfortable library to work with, and that it gives a significant benefit and is much better for the memory that is taken up by our database, and gives a fairly large benefit in terms of calculation speed. I also want to note that it was very comfortable and very nice to work with the developer team. They answer the questions very quickly. And on their website, they have all the required documentation that is sufficient, that is sufficiently open and fairly clear, so you can download it, read the documents, and use it. And in case of any problems, to just ask advice from the developers to get your consultations, because they are always prepared to answer, and they're very eager for your feedback. And I guess that this is it. And I'm ready to answer your questions if you have any.
Добрый день.
Good day. Did you try to move part of the calculation load to take maybe like a microcomputer, like a Raspberry Pi or something else, so that part of the calculations would be done on the spot? So not only to collect the data into the center, but like carry this out. Of course, I do not have such opportunities because the development of any electronics that goes into transport is many thousands of money. Many money. But for example, a Raspberry Pi with a GPS is going to cost, well, something similar even in the Russian development, is going to be approximately 20 USD for the entire package. 20 USD. Well, it's not a lot. To buy one, it's not a lot. It's not hard to just buy one and to just put it in one vehicle. It's one thing. But to go through the entire tender procedures and to get the procurement procedures, it's much easier to just do your own thing that is just going to use what already exists. Thank you very much for the presentation. So you have a particular bus that is traveling and it is experiencing trouble with the GSM. It is not passing on the data. And when the GSM appears, does it pass on its entirety track, or does it give only the latest point which it was in? I can't answer that with precision, but it does not supply the entirety of the route that is passed. But as a result, we end up with holes in the information. So in case any interruption in GSM occurs, we end up with gaps in our data. Once again, thank you very much for the report. It was fairly interesting. I have a question. I think that for tasks like these, for the storage of tracks and the data on the tracks, and with the timelines, I think that neither PostGIS nor MobilityDB are very useful. I think it's better to use some time series database, something like Influx or Prometheus. Well, here it's very comfortable that we are using a single database that is fairly universal, that we are able to store everything inside, not just the tracks. Yeah, but that's because they need... Yeah, but once again, a time series database is much faster than some relative databases. Can I answer you? Well, they don't need to somehow get the data across time. They just need math. They need an extension that would give them the opportunity to conduct all these calculations. Well, if you are able to apply all these extensions, then why not? So that you would have all the CT types, all the temporals, and the geospatial data types. Oh, well, can we have the microphone here? Can I ask you a short question? A couple of slides back, please. One more? Yes, there we go. Here, do you have, as a result of your use of PostGIS and MobilityDB, are there any deviations? And if there are deviations, why do they arise? Well, you can see that there are deviations, but they are in tenth of a percent of kilometers per hour. And this can be explained either by the fact that they identify the boundaries somewhat differently, a little bit. And the next one is that the MobilityDB allows to approximate the entire segment. So if, for example, we lost some data, so the car marked in one spot and then it was not marked on the second and then marked again on the third one, then when we use the same script as I use in PostGIS, the middle segment will not be accounted for because it has no points on it. But when we have a track, it is perceived as a single line, and with this query we're able to take into account this gap segment as well, and it is going to be accounted for. So I assume that MobilityDB is giving us a more accurate and more full picture of what we're doing. Yes, I was also very happy with the report. It's very beautiful. It's very interesting. And this information is used to inform the passengers regarding when the transport is going to arrive at a certain route. No, what we're doing is just analytics. It's already after, yes. Do you use this database to make decisions, to inform? Well, for making decisions, yes. For making decisions, yes. Here we have some problem points, and in what cases and what decisions do you make, and for who these decisions are, who is executing them? Well, this is the interaction with the Department of Transport, and this is the situation where we look at where there is a point of getting select public transport lanes. So, for example, if we have places where transport cannot move properly, if we have a sufficient amount of vehicles coming through per hour, big enough traffic, then there's a point in getting a select public transport lane in place in that street. And we work with SOT, with traffic controls for understanding how we should set the traffic lights. We understand when the duration of the traffic lights are too long or too short. Excuse me, yeah, good day, I'm to your left, to your left, to your left. Oh, perfect, yes. Hello. Can you please advise the GPS tools with time start to give a lot of deviations? And in our work, we call these problems the airplanes. When the transport goes a couple of kilometers per second and then comes back, do you somehow clean this data, or do you just save everything you get from the GPS and then it is taken into account by the algorithms of PostGIS or DB? Well, saving, yeah, we save everything we get. But right now, because we are going to be switching to a system when the data that we get over 24 hours, we convert into MobilityDB, we're going to actually be cleaning out the data of the so-called airplanes where the transport moves many kilometers per second. But right now, it is just tracked in the script. Yes, thank you. Understood. Good day, and thank you very much for your presentation. Can you please tell me where did you get number 30? Is this some business thing? Why not 20 seconds? Why not 60 seconds? I don't know. I know that this is not true for every city, but for us, our GPS, our GLONASS systems are timed to this. If it's going to be 15 seconds, will the analytics be better or worse? I think theoretically should be better, but what about the amount of data? Well, the amount of data, well, in PostGIS is going to double, and in MobilityDB with this new system, we need to look into it. Thank you. Thank you very much for your very interesting presentation. My question is as follows. Do you use in your modeling systems your experiment that allows you to visualize the results of the modeling? So, for example, you have got a new lane in place or changed the traffic, and will you have the opportunity to try and trace how the situation is going to change instead of just applying and trying? Well, we're trying to use it for forecasting and for experimenting. We're trying to use it there, but no, we do not yet have a ready product which we could brag with, which we could show for. But yes, we are working in this direction, but not yet. Thank you. Well, I think that we can call it done in this. If you have any questions remaining, you can ask them in private. I want to remind you that we have the creators of MobilityDB in this audience, Mahmoud Zagar and Esteban. I'm sorry, I can't remember your surname, Dazimani. You can also come to them and ask them questions about MobilityDB. Thank you.